It's May 20th, 2021, and we're talking about Pentanet.gg's run at MSI and the LCO in general with Oceanic casters Zack, Rusty, Pie. This is the True Sight Podcast. Welcome to the True Sight Podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen, and my guest today is Australia's own Zack Rusty Pie. Welcome to the show, Rusty.
Australia's own, I like that one. Thank you for having me, though, Tim. I'm actually, I will admit this, I'm a little bit nervous to do a podcast with you in a formal capacity, just because I know your history in the esports world is like a heavy stats-driven analytical man, but I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah, well, formal is one thing. I'm wearing shorts right now, so formal. Same. I don't know about that. And for what it's worth, I don't know how often I reference any stats on this show. It's got probably less than once an episode, so I think we should be safe, unless you want to go that direction. But I think my my Run It episode today on Cloud9's performance at MSI has given me plenty of statistical interactions with people all over the internet, so I'm okay with taking a break from that. We'll focus on you. We'll focus on the LCO. We'll focus on MSI and Pentanet.gg. So, but before we kind of jump into everything, I think it'd be great for people who maybe aren't as familiar with you and your work, and especially your history in the scene, just to catch them up a little bit on kind of who you are, what you're up to right now, where what your resume is in the League of Legends space.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a large number of people that have just thought I've dropped off the face of the earth, right? Because I was a caster who was going to MSI, going to Worlds, working on the LPL. Full time, which was my main region, and I did that for about 4 years, 5 years actually, closer to 5, and then I came back to Australia in 2019, where I was working as a head coach and commentator at the same time. So I took the opportunity, unfortunately, I will say, away from the LPL that I did and do still love very much, to explore other roles. And from there, the career went back to casting full time and doing some other outside studies and work while still in Australia. So that's where I'm at now. Just casually working on the LCO, the new OPL. Yeah. You could say, I suppose, the reinvented OPL. But a big history of maybe up to 10 years now of esports and League of Legends.
Yeah, definitely. You're one of the faces that when all of the LPL casting in English came out of Australia because of the time zones and the fact that you guys were casting OPL, and it just kind of like fit. And so we used to see a lot of faces, you and Spawn and others, and you exported Pastry Time and all these kinds of things. Yeah. And yeah, I think given just the way things have played out over the last few years and what they did with the LPL cast, some of you have been a little less in the public eye or shifted into other roles, and it's great to kind of catch up with you now and see, and especially I think people hopefully are having their attention drawn back into the Oceanic area again because of what Pentanet.gg has done at MSI, and also on the North American front with all of the Oceanic players coming to NA, playing in Academy, playing in the LCS. I think it's an area that we have a lot of reason to pay attention to. So glad to have you here to talk about it all. So why don't we jump into kind of what's most kind of immediately relevant right now, which is what Pentanet has been doing, or what they did at MSI. Of course, they're out of the tournament now. They and Cloud9 are both heading back home, so we're sharing in that experience. But when as someone who is watching the tournament from Oceania and watching this very historic achievement for them, what's the experience of that tournament run been like for you?
It's been a really, I want to say surreal, probably is the best word for it, as an overall experience, because you have to remember, and it has been mentioned a lot on the broadcast, but just to reiterate it, it was a liquidated league completely. It was dissolved. It didn't exist. The OPL, which is what we were known as in Oceania, was completely taken away by Riot, and then it's not a Riot product now that has been reinvented. It's going to be Capital ESL that have made the LCO. So you have to remember this happened in like October of 2020. And in that period of time, like 3-month turnaround, a tournament starts. We cram a 6-week league in instead of a 10-week season like normal. We just rush a team to MSI because we were lucky enough to get the slot. And it just happened to be this, I feel like, perfect storm of we had players with personality, we had players with skill, with motivation, with hunger, put it all together. And we have a team in Pentanet.gg that exceeds expectations, not just on a global scale, because people didn't actually even realize there was an Oceanic League a lot of the time still. Like, who is Pentanet.gg? Where are they even from? But they finish top 2. They go to the main stage. They even take a game that no one would have expected. A very tragic game, I will say, for you, Tim, being a North American fan. But
tragic in a
they do all
ways.
of that. Yeah, exactly right. But they do all of that, and they impress everyone on a local scale as well. Even people who knew them day to day would be absolutely in awe of what they've been able to achieve with how little time and resources and energy from the rest of the world that they've been given.
Well, and let's unpack the lead up to this a little bit more, like going all the way back to October when the OPL was dissolved, and they said, hey, basically, we are still going to give you guys, for 2021, we're still going to give you a slot at MSI and Worlds, because probably for them it's just logistical. Like, not having 12 teams there would be annoying, so let's still have one, right? And well, you guys figure out how to pick someone to send there. But it wasn't just that, and like having to condense in a schedule. It's also the fact that after that announcement happened, that triggered a whole bunch. I think that lined up, I don't know what the exact timing was, with Oceanic players being given North American residency, which is, I assume there was some form of compensation that they did for that. I don't know how much it was motivated by the LCS wanting to say, hey, this will be good for us, we'll get all their talent. Like, I don't really know the details of that, but whatever it was, those two things coming together, OPL kind of dissolving, Oceanic players having NA residency, you got a whole bunch of players having kind of a second giant wave of kind of an exodus into North America. So you had all these Oceanic players in Academy. You already had some in LCS, and there's more of that happening. So not only did your league get kind of reset, but you lost a whole bunch of talent, presumably off the top of the league, right? How much of an impact did that have on what kind of played out this year so far?
I mean, huge. Not taking into account the international results, because that was amazingly better than we've ever done before. But like the league wasn't just taken, you're right. It was at the exact same time, in the exact same post, that we were told that we were also North American residents. So there was this really weird crossroads where if you are a professional player in Oceania, the incentive to stay was zero.
Yeah. Because
you were just told you can go to North America. They have good, like, minimum wage pay rates for academy players. Yeah. We don't have a league. So, like, it makes a lot of sense to disappear. And so we lost, I don't know the exact number. Yeah. I should have done the maths at some stage. I can't believe I haven't. Oh, more. Has to be more. But that's around the world, not just to North America. So, there is Rogue, who's in the French league. We've lost coaches to other regions as well. Soul Strikes, who does travel the world, is now in another region. He's taken an Oceanic player with him, who has name changed 17 times. And we've got 2 or 3 players that went over to the UK League. They kind of come and go, just because there is a lot of dual citizenships from Australia to the EU. And then, in North America, there's probably 10 to 15 players, and then 5 to 10 coaches that went as well. And if you consider that a league is approximately 40 players for us, that's close to half the league worth of people that have just upped and left, or like the top 20% of players specifically that have upped and left. And that affects everything. The trickle down is huge for what that means for a league. Yeah,
for sure. I think, we had players like Fudge in an area. We had Destiny left before all this, right? Like, he was in the LEC all of last
Destiny year. Was in LEC. Yeah. You had King with Fudge, though.
Yeah. King, obviously FBI had already come over. So, like, there was a handful, right? Yeah, Lost was already over. There were a handful of these, but then you had this whole other wave. Triple was already here. But like now Harry, now Ayla, Isles, like a lot of other players. And so, you know, I'm kind of curious what's going to happen 6 months from now. Whether some players, now that they have an actual league to play in kind of back home, will prefer that, or whether they'll stick around, or what's going to happen with kind of the future of this. But regardless of what happens in the future, it definitely stripped out a lot of talent from your league. So with that as context, now you do manage to put things together enough to send a team to MSI. What was the run like for Pentanet, like reaching that qualifying spot? Was this like, you know, you look at PSG Talent, for example, and they completely dominated their own league, and it was like kind of like a Damwon last year. Like, this is a very clear number one. Was it like that for Pentanet, that this was very clearly your best team, or did they have to fight their way through to make it?
Yeah, they were very clearly our best team. They went 13-1 in the regular season. The one defeat they had, they played a Mumu support in the last game of the season.
I saw Mumu getting memed. I wasn't sure why.
Yeah, it was a funny game because it was legitimately winnable, but they lost either way to a Vayne top from, I think there was a 1-14 or 1-13 opponent, so it happens. But yeah, dominated the regular season, never really looked in doubt. They basically formed the meta of our local region, just because they were so good on their own individual champions that everyone had to accommodate them, so they were that level of dominant.
Yeah.
And then going to the playoffs, they were actually challenged. So there was maybe 2 serious contenders through the LCO regular season. It was Pensanet.gg and Peace. And Peace play the game in a way, and we'll probably talk about Pensanet at MSI as well, right, in terms of how they play, but they do tend to be a mid to bottom style team where Peace are like winning bottom, then playing through the rest of the map first. So it was a really cool matchup, and it genuinely pushed Pensanet and forced them to be better, which was the one thing that we all wanted. Because I always feel like a team that doesn't lose a game is a team that's going to learn where they're going wrong at an international event and not have time to adapt, because you get like 6 games. In saying that, they've had 18 games, 19 games at MSI, but you know, visas and whatnot. But yeah, they were dominant. So they came into MSI above and beyond, like the best, and the team that we wanted to send.
Yeah, for sure. Was there, you know, I think the big standout for most people's experience of Pentanet, you already mentioned, you know, Pabu, and just the personality that he brought, and you know, and the hair and the great interviews and all of that kind of stuff. Did he have that, you know, was it very much him as the center of the personality of the team back at home, or was that more of like an international kind of like just caught everyone's attention?
Oh, that is a good question. In terms of local personalities, I feel like this is true internationally. It's just that like the public's eyes go in different directions. They're pretty equal share. Chaz is a pretty big personality in the team. Decoy and Biopanther are very quiet players, the support and the top laner. So they're the humble, calm, normal guys. But the other 3 are just rowdy and good value. But Pabu obviously does stand out. He's the guy that went to All Stars, won the 1v1. So like he is a known quantity to international viewers. And that is a factor. So when he gets to go, not only does he have that prestige, I suppose would be an okay word for it, behind him, but he shows up with neon green hair, looking like Billie Eilish, does easily stand out.
Yeah, whereas like in game, I would say Chaz was probably the one who caught my attention a lot more with his actual play, and obviously the picks he was bringing out in the Zed and all of that, and the solo kill on Cryan, like. But it was kind of interesting to me how from their play, Chaz was probably the one who kind of was very visible, but Pabu ended up being kind of the public face in a way, right? So yeah. The funny thing with this team as well is that Pabu's never really been the face of the team. He is obviously one of the core leading members of the gang, but there was a point in the middle of the season where they were like, even though we're undefeated, we need to improve still. And they started playing through Chaz to Praedyth, and you could see the recipe already start to build, right? Where they just, like, it's not as simple as just be the best jungler or be the star player yourself. He always has played for his team and always will play for his team. That's just the way Pabu is. So he's never actually intended to be a standout on the Rift, always off the Rift. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think that is kind of what I ended up seeing at least. So we get to MSI. Let's talk through that group stage. Obviously, there was some unusual context around this, right? It ended up in the 3-team group because the VCS couldn't attend, unfortunately for them. And so you had a lot more time playing against the same 2 opponents. It wasn't a double round robin. It was a quadruple round robin. You played 4 games in every team.
Yeah. Yeah. So quadruple round robin, 2 teams
total. Yeah. So, and I'm trying to remember the sequence of this. Maybe I should have looked it up beforehand. But obviously, ended up taking lots of games off of Unicorns. What was, at what point did you start to believe that, hey, I think they're really going to do this, or they're capable of doing this?
Truthfully, so a lot of public perception, particularly through tips. I don't know if you saw these, but I was the only Oceanic person that went against Pentanet.gg. I've been memed pretty consistently for it, but I also have said this before in conversations and on interviews with people that I thought they could finish top 2 easily. The context here is like, I do feel like if the VCS representatives were there, it's a completely different ballgame. And it may have been closer to impossible to actually make it out, just because like the VCS region is very talented. Yeah. But when it was Unicorns of Love, who I do think that the LCL is in more of a redevelopment and rebuilding year, and RNG are just the shoe-in first. Like, you only have to beat 1 team. You could easily beat 1 team. And it was the second game they played against the Unicorns where they did actually win, and it was solid. Like, it wasn't a shaky win. It was just a clean cut. They got a lead. They closed the game out.
It wasn't like, some that was when I was level like, 1 or like a level 3 weird thing, and now you just snowball it. It was like, hey, they straight up played better.
Yeah, it was a team fight back to back to back. Like, it was just clean. They lost to them once. They shored up their weaknesses in that loss, and they were just good to go. And I was like, yeah, they make it through now for sure. But doesn't stop the doubter in your head being an Oceanic person saying, we've never done it. But yeah, we got there.
Yeah, no, I know that experience. There were lots of those for Cloud9 that came true as well. But yeah, so they ended up doing it. They get through, and now they're in the group stage. You know, you could tell the vibe from the team even in the group stage. Before going to the Rumble stage, even in the group stage, they were just very low expectations. We're here to have fun, have a great experience, and not that they weren't taking it seriously, but obviously with all the memeing they were doing, the little signs and the the dressing up the coach and all of that, with the fashion he was bringing out, you could tell they were just having a great time, right? And then they go into the Rumble stage, and that's just going to become, now you notch up the difficulty quite a bit for every team there, and obviously they're going to, even to that much more of an extent, they're just going to treat this as a great experience and having a lot of fun. What were the chances you would have given going in of them taking a game? Did you think it was like, 50-50, we'll get 1 game? Or
I would have said there was a 15% chance they take a game, depending on the form of PSG. And they came in and absolutely tore them apart. So I was like, okay, I don't think we even get a game, but it doesn't stop you from watching, and doesn't stop you from hoping that they'll be able to get one, and they did. And if I'm going to drop one stat for you out of anything the whole time, it's that when they're ahead at 15 minutes, they have a 100% win rate. So seeing that game against Cloud9, just knowing, Pentanet is a team and a play style stat aside, that like when they get a lead, they're actually a really solid team. I was like, that's dangerous for Cloud9. That's genuinely dangerous for Cloud9. But I didn't expect, to be honest, anything more than 15% they get a win.
Yeah, and that's, I think that seemed a little conservative to me, maybe because I was more doubtful on Cloud9 specifically, and I had that like NA fear in the back of my mind, like kind of like you just mentioned. And PSG were like, definitely coming into the tournament as a whole, I think most people would have expected, other than PSG's manager himself, that PSG were like 5th place team, right? Cloud9 should be 4th and PSG should be 5th. Maybe it's close. But from the group stage itself, PSG maybe a little shaky, but they actually started to impress me from there. Did that change for you? Did you still feel that way, like going into Rumble stage, you still felt like PSG was the 5th best team, or was that more of a pre-tournament notion? Maybe, I don't know how much you actually watched them.
No, it's a good question, actually. I have a very hard time off the initial groups to actually rank them. And Cloud9, first of all, was so inconsistent that, like, I'm not surprised that they ended 5th, but I'm upset that they ended 5th, because seeing them in a best of 5 against one of the top 2 teams could have been an upset. They could have been in the finals, and I think we all should be able to acknowledge that if we take off the rose-tinted lenses of being an NA fan for a second. Like, 100% they had that potential. So if you look at the results right now and say it's PGG 6, C9 5th, that still feels wrong, because there's a world where Cloud9 could actually be in that top 3. But for PSG, I think their unparalleled early game aggression fit exactly the meta that this tournament has turned into, and they did it from day one. So their substitute AD carry who comes in, Doggo, right? Like, I don't know exactly how familiar he is with the rest of the team, but he actually came in and fits the bill for what this tournament required. So even though he's over aggressive at times, and he's banned himself from Tristana for that reason, I believe as well. Like, it made sense and it fit. And so they've pulled the rabbit out of the hat almost, right? They've hit the meta nail on the head, and they've come in and absolutely tore it up. And I've been very impressed with them.
Yeah, definitely. I think PSG have gotten kind of lucky with their emergency substitute scenarios 2 tournaments in a row now. But, can't blame them for that. Good for them. I think, seeing we could talk so much about the way that entire Rumble stage played out. And, to self-plug a little bit, I broke down what I thought went wrong for Cloud9 in a Run It video this week. So if you haven't checked that out, you can check that one out and decide how you feel about it. But all of the teams, I think, had their moments of inconsistency. I honestly think any of these teams, except maybe Damwon, could have had the type of game in where they lost to Pentanet. Like, I could actually see RNG, or at least coming close maybe with RNG, because they're so clutch at, like, finding a way at the end, like they did against Cloud9 with that back door. But, like, there was so much inconsistency from all of them where they had these moments and you're like, whoa, something is just going wrong in this game, and they need to go to the next one and try again. And so I think that's going to make the semifinals really fascinating. Maybe we can talk about that in a minute, but recapping all of what Pentanet managed to achieve at MSI, what do you think this kind of means for the LCO, given everything that you guys have gone through in the past 6 to 8 months? What does that what does it mean personally for you, maybe as kind of a member or a representative of the LCO, and what do you think it means going forward? What kind of impact might it have for you guys?
For me personally, I think it means more eyes come to our region, and not for me, but like for the region. And I think that's really important, because they've made a lot of fans, Pentanet. They've shown that there's personality, and that was one of the big pulls that Oceania has always had, right? Like, we compete, and it's terrible that we have to do this, but it's just the way time zones work, right? We're competing with the LCK and the LPL for viewers, always. And they're 2 of the best regions in the world. And so we have to come up with an idea in our head of, like, why would you watch Oceania when you've got Korea and China, just absolutely insane regions with insane depths of talent, so much to offer a viewer. And we've always had personality, we've had fun, we've been more relatable, right? We're an English-speaking player base with English-speaking players. And I think that PGG got to go to the international and show that, like, they can have, like, we still have that personality. The OPL may have been taken from us, but the players still exist in the exact way that you want to see them. So I'm hoping that we get all of our viewers and our fans and everyone that's disappeared in the 6 months that the OPL disappeared back, because they've been notably missing a lot of the engaged fans in chat, and we want them back. I'm hoping that they saw this performance and said, it's good to go, we can come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they can take your players, they can take your coaches, they can even take your league, but they can never take your koalas.
They'd absolutely have taken the koalas, Tim. It's banned in chat. It's banned in chat, man.
Wait,
it's all
what?
Yeah.
What's the context on this?
So I've the Raise Your Koalas Twitch chat spam that everyone likes to put in. I've done some digging on this because I wanted it to be unbanned, but it's detected as another language, one of the symbols. which is an auto ban phrase for a Twitch bot, and it's hard coded, so there is actually no way, even as an allowance, to let it through.
So for the fan
So
zone,
the koalas is,
ban it.
yeah,
Oh, that's terrible.
it's a real tragedy.
Like the only thing that kept me having any level of positive experience when Pentanet beat Cloud9 was I've been doing like live win probability tweets, just screenshotting the live win probability feature on Oracle's Elixir, and especially as the days went on, I started thinking like I need something to make this amusing for myself as I tweet them, and I was putting in just fun little jokey comments on them, and I had a whole sequence of koala related tweets, so that helped me to amuse myself enough to not despair during that game. So thank you for the koalas.
You're welcome.
Saved my sanity.
Make sure we save the koalas now as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so MSI, we've got the knockout stage coming up, and we've talked a little bit about some of these teams, but I think it'd be cool just to spend a couple minutes on thinking about what to anticipate from that. And of course, the first semifinal is tomorrow. Supposed to be Damwon against Mad Lions, but because of a little bit of drama going on, with RNG apparently needing to go in for some kind of COVID test appointment for like blood testing on Saturday, they weren't able to play on Saturday, so they had to move them to Friday, and it's a whole big thing that is pretty gross, honestly, but here it is. RNG are playing against PSG in the first match. What are your expectations going into this one? I think most people would just say, hey, RNG 3-0, 3-1. Do you think it's that straightforward?
So this is a really interesting matchup for me, and it is the type of volatile matchup that could be a 3-0. It's also the type of volatile matchup that could go to 5 games easily. And I think that's the most interesting part about RNG against PSG is they're pretty fast-paced teams, but they also both can adapt very well. So you come at them with fast pace, they'll be able to match you almost instantly and understand what's going on. And you can harken back to examples of that for RNG, even the lane swaps going crazy, handled fine. Anything that someone has thrown at them has been handled perfectly fine, and they've managed to make something out of it. Maybe not a win, but they challenged. And I think PSG's unbridled early aggression is something that can be easily weathered by a team that's prepared for it and is used to it and can adapt to it, and that is RNG. And you know, as good as Doggo is, that tendency to be over aggressive into Gala and Ming, I do think is a point of contention or potential weakness that will be very heavily looked at, because Ming is just a monster, man.
Like if there's one player on RNG who is going to punish PSG for stepping up too much, Ming is the guy to do it for sure. He's so good. I think I would personally say Xiaohu has been the best performing player on their team overall, but between him and Ming, it's very much a toss up. What I'm very curious about is to see what happens in kind of mid jungle and specifically the mid piece of that, because Cryan has struggled quite a bit at times with his matchups, with we've described before, kind of laning with glue in his feet, like being unwilling to lean out to crabs or support pushes and priority and things like that. I'm curious whether PSG are going to be able to exploit that at all, how much they identify it, and how they'll draft around it. Because I think if you draft Cryan away from, people started banning TF against him, at least in the second phase. If you draft him away from the Victor and the standard control mages, best of fives are where you target somebody with those kinds of ban strategies, right? I'm wondering what they're going to do about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Like game one strategies, because you can effectively throw away games to see if these bans cripple someone. It's a viable idea, and you mentioned Victor. That was what I was going to say as well. Like he can just default to a control mage that insta clears waves and compensate, right, for maybe his lack of desire to leave those lanes. In terms of Cryan as a player, though, he's this really weird, like the last couple games I saw from him, he wasn't obviously doing the greatest on his scoreline, but I think the amount of work he's doing is surprisingly high. Because there obviously has now been a spotlight put on him negatively, perhaps, for what he's able to do, but just watching the way he played, even in a defeat where like he had a 1-4 scoreline, I was like, oh, it doesn't look good, but like the work that he did was still admirable, and he does his job. He's kind of like a weak side Titan of mid lane. who has Xiaohu and Ming and Wei kind of running around him everywhere, and he wants to contribute, but he can't because he's getting nothing, but he's doing his best.
Yeah.
I am curious to see how that goes if they attack him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that would mean for him, but so far, I actually have a little bit of hope for Cryan.
Sure. No, yeah, and I think you can overcorrect, and I think I probably sometimes overcorrect on criticizing him on certain things, just because honestly the kinds of things that I think he's weak in are things that I'm very hyper aware of, because it just happens to be kind of a piece of analysis that I focus a lot on, is, you know, mid laners priority and you know, how much they use Fog of War and stuff like that. I just tend to, you know, you get fixated on certain ideas. But he's definitely not a bad player overall. I think he does a lot of things well. And, you know, it is a bit of stat sky heresy. Your scoreline really does not tell the story of your performance as much as I might like to use those numbers to illustrate points. But it's far more about, like, I think if you are going to attack him, it's probably with things like playing aggressively for the Scuttle Crabs, playing for like shallow jungle invades, seeing if you can get the jump on somebody at Raptors or Wolves, or not Wolves, sorry, Raptors, or like you know, just into the jungle entrances. Maybe even contesting control wards and stuff like that, and get there 2 seconds before he does, and suddenly that turns into a kill. I think that's the kind of thing that might be vulnerable from him. But you think this is a slight tangent, but I want your thoughts on this. Do you think that Fog of War is the least used, like actively thought about weapon in competitive League? You know, I think to really have an opinion on that, I'd need to spend a lot more time in team comms. And one of the weaknesses for myself as an analyst that I've been trying to fill in a lot over the past year and a half is I've almost exclusively consumed high level League from observer mode, right? From watching broadcasted matches. And that can really mess with your understandings of the game, because you don't realize what it's like to watch a single team's perspective. If you don't, like, because I've never been a high level player myself. You know, I just haven't played that often. I spent far more time watching than I'd ever did playing. And so I think my view of the game was always warped a little bit that way. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who are the same way. And so when we had ProView briefly, that was great. So good. But even then being able to watch, like, you know, I also never really watched like solo queue streamers and stuff like that. It just wasn't interesting to me. But I think you'd get that similar experience from that if you don't play. Or being able to then watch things like, when they do in-house games, like a bunch of the NA players that have done it, EU players that have done it in the past, and you watch a player's stream during those in-house games with the comms, with the Fog of War, all of that. You know, I think it does probably get underused, but not. I think it's probably one of those things that a good understanding of Fog of War and the threat it provides brings you from a good player to a great player. And at whatever tier you want to apply that is up to you, but I think the really good teams use it very well. I think the decent teams use it a little bit. Most underused is a strong phrase. Yeah, it definitely is. But it is. Yeah, I mean, I think of it as a tool that is needed. So it is a necessity, right? To, like, if you're a mid laner, you clear a wave, you dip into Fog of War, and even if they see you dip to the bottom side into Fog of War, the enemy bottom lane now knows something could happen, right? Like, you're playing to their fears just through controlling Fog. I do think that is like a supremely winning tool a lot of the time if you are a great team. So yeah, I don't know about the most, right? But I just wanted your thoughts on that. Yeah, I think it's probably one of those things that the jump from solo queue into organized play, probably a lot of players pick it up during that transition. I imagine it gets used far less in solo queue than it does in pro play, but actually, it'd probably be even more valuable in solo queue, honestly. Yeah, it's probably used more in solo queue because the overall vision is less, I think. So Fog of War is used more, maybe not like actively thought about like a mid laner pressuring with Fog of War, but like kills and ganks and stuff 100%. Yeah, well, and I think the way it's used in a solo queue environment versus a pro environment, it's used for different things. In solo queue, if you go into the fog, you're probably more likely to actually pull off the roam, and they're not likely to see it coming as much because the team comms aren't there. Whereas in pro play, I imagine a higher proportion of the time you're leaning into fog so that they have to tell each other, so that they play conservatively, and it's just that soft pressure. That's just a total guess. I'm just like abstract reasoning on it, and maybe it's completely wrong, but I don't know.
No, I think that's fair. Like pressure types is an interesting conversation that we could digress towards as well. Absolutely, but like soft pressure is a thing that I would say doesn't exist in solo queue much at all, where it does in competitive actively.
Because either you're watching the minimap or you aren't, and you might get a couple pings. But unlike in pro play, where you're going to have your team all telling you, hey, this person's missing, hey, careful, they might be roaming this way or whatever. And, it's much more likely to be there. A player who I think is pretty good at that, and I was actually going to make this comment when you were talking about like the Oceanic residency and so on. A player named Pretty, who's playing in NA Academy with Immortals, played in Greece for a while, but had an Australian parent, took on the Oceanic residency so that he could become an NA resident.
No.
And anyways, he's good at that. It's one of the subtle things he does that that some mid laners at the NA Academy level definitely don't do.
Can we claim him? Is that
if he wanted
is he now permanently an Oceanic resident?
Yes. So if he wanted to play in the LCO, he could. Well, I mean, he could get imported technically anyways, like even otherwise, but I think he's probably pretty happy in an academy. You can't have him.
Yeah.
He's mine. I mean, ours. I mean, let's move on.
Oh, we're not going to hard sell for him. Don't worry, mate. He's all yours.
So going into the summer of the LCO, now that we've had our analytical digression, which is great because, I think that's one of the things that this show is all about. But the LCO is going into summer now. Penn and Ed are going to come back home. What are some of the big storylines? Obviously, you've got the triumphant heroes returning home and they want to retain their crown and all of that. Are there kind of up-and-coming players or teams that you think are most likely to challenge them?
So when they were sent to Iceland, there was, like we mentioned before, only really one team that was going to challenge them. In total, there's probably 3 teams that were going to be competing for the crown in the summer split. My early predictions of the story points here, however, though, is that Penn are just going to come back and they're going to smash everyone for a few weeks because there is that adaptation period. They've had so much time now to learn against the best teams in the world, to play in a rich, maybe not the nicest, but a rich solo queue environment. And they're going to have like this couple of week period. And it's a little bit sad to admit this, but it's always true, where they come back down to the Oceanic level more. But at the same time, if the local players do their part properly and respect the 5-6 players returning home, then they elevate.
Yeah.
So taking that into account in solo queue, transitioning that to competitive where it'll be even greater, there will be probably a 5 week out of the 10 odd season where they'll just dominate still and nothing will change. But Peace are the team that I'm looking to challenge them 100%, give them a run for their money and try and actually take that world slot from them. And then Direwolves was the third team that if they get their act together, it's possible that they're a contender as well. But I don't think anyone in terms of stories will be actively challenging Pentanet.gg anytime soon, man.
Sure. One of the things that can happen when you have a lot of talent kind of outflux, if I'm allowed to coin that word, I'm sure it's been used before, but is you have other players who haven't had as much experience who get to step up. They get to fill those gaps and try to be kind of the next generation of that. Who are some of the players that you think are creating the next wave, or is there anybody really standing out?
It's such a tough question, given, and I don't know how much you know about this, but the Oceanic ladder is in a state of almost disrepair, where it's like finding those new players. They exist, they do, but it's sporadic. They're few and far between right now. There's no like wave of rookies. One example of a player is Kevy, who is a substitute for the Direwolves, who has played 1 or 2 games during the LCO in the first split. A lot of potential, young player, definitely hungry. The Chiefs have a mid laner, Kisei, who is the exact same. 17-year-old came into the league and has been on a tear. Big assassin player, which is always what you want to see from the young mechanical upstarts that learn the rest of it. you see them getting challenger with the Z or something, is like that's a promising prospect already.
Learn the Oriana later. You come in with your Z.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're a freak show Oriana, that's nice, but learn all the other majors because that's getting banned. But like that, yeah, there's 2 players there. There's maybe 10 in total, including solo queue though, and that's not a lot of hope that I'm giving, which it makes me sad even saying that out loud. But solo queue is in this point where it needs to fix itself to let those players actually come through and shine, because right now it's not really happening.
Yeah, it's too bad. Are there players in the league who you think, like, given the wave of players going into other regions and so on, do you think there are a few more players who are putting themselves in that kind of position, or do you think it's more likely to go the other direction and have some players return?
I suspect that more players will be returning, but those that do probably won't even want to play. It's at this crossroads now where incentives to stay in America are a lot higher than incentives to return, just because there's not a lot of money backing a brand new league that is rebuilding from the beginning, from the ground floor. So locally, most players will want to go internationally. That should be the obvious choice, and that should be the aspiration for a lot of these players. So like we've been talking about this right now. How is Pentanet going to go in summer? I don't know how many are staying, first of all. Like, are they just going to go to North America? Because I'm sure there's offers there. And another facet of this that hasn't really been discussed yet is the collegiate scene. Oceanic players, and this is my opinion on this, and I have spoken about this with some current and former pro players, they should be aiming for that. Because you get to go to university, right? Or you go to college and play League of Legends as a part of a scholarship program. That is the literal dream. You should be chasing that if you can, right? Like, if you're not getting into the LCS or have prospects of making it within like the year, go to collegiate first and try and make your path that way instead. So that's, in terms of Oceanic aspirations, should be what they're all hunting for 100%.
Yeah, and we've seen certain collegiate programs in the US, like Maryville specifically, have run kind of Oceanic player tryouts and try to get exposure for them, and take the best for themselves if they can, but as is their right if they're putting the resources into that. But I think it's definitely a great path, and I think for a lot of just players in general, Oceanic or otherwise, if you can kind of pair that, I think it's a little tough to say whether collegiate is a path to pro directly. Let's say you're a North American player and you're finishing high school, but you haven't broken into kind of that academy pipeline yet. Does it, can you go to a collegiate program for 2 years and then swing into the LCS? I'm not sure. But even if not, playing through a full collegiate program, having a scholarship for it, the experience of all that is a great route to go in general. I mean, an esports career as a player is so uncertain. So
yeah, most definitely is, and that's speaking for North America as well as Oceania in that regard, right? Like, now that opportunity does exist. Like, Maryville did amazing work. The one thing that really upset me was this year there wasn't enough reception from the local region Oceania towards the Combine a second year in a row. So it was canned for Oceania. So that's one of those moments where it's like, if you're a player locally, like, it's amazing that more people aren't trying to put the effort towards that. As I just think maybe last year it happened at the right time with the way that, everything had happened with the OPL, that they were pressured into an option. But like, I want the players to realize that is a legitimate, good option.
Yeah. And the collegiate North American championships are going on right now. I believe we're heading into the top 8 really soon here. And it's a big deal. It may not be LCS, but it's a pretty big deal, and they're putting more and more resources into building out all that infrastructure and making it more intense and competitive, and more schools involved. So I think the opportunities will keep growing, and hopefully there's enough uptake on that, both locally in NA and from Oceanic players and so on. Well, I think this has all been really fascinating to hear about kind of what's going on over there, and hopefully things go a good direction, and if some players do end up kind of returning, at least they'll help maybe with the solo queue population and all of that. What are your kind of goals for yourself in the league, what do you think would be success by the end of this year? What would things look like to say, hey, I think we're on the right track here?
I mean, realistically, success for this year is not about performance or results. In terms of like international events, I would say success is another consistent split, a decent, like a not embarrassing showing at an international event, and then coming into the 2022 season saying, look at this amazing year that we had, and trying to bring back the monetary inclusion from sponsors and everyone, and for people to actually say that the LCO is like a legitimate real thing. It's back, it's consistent, it's proven itself. Let's invest in it one more time as a viewer, as a sponsor, as a brand, whatever it may be. I just want Summer to be a consistently good league, and I want everyone to jump back in 2022.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be great to see, and I wish you guys all the best for sure with building that momentum. The time zones are a little awkward to kind of try to promote the viewership when you guys go live. I'm not necessarily awake to hit the retweet button, but do what I can to send some traffic your way, and I hope we can all kind of chip in, because I think it's good for the entire scene to have as many regions as possible succeeding and thriving and growing. I don't think it's good for any of us to have leagues kind of floundering or struggling along. So best of luck with that. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to kind of take the opportunity to put out there while we've got the chance?
Nothing crazy. The only thing that I'm thinking of right now, and my head's just in that place at this point, is like, one, I hope RNG wins MSI. That's my personal prediction for it. I'm hoping that they win it. And two, I hope that solo queue gets fixed. That's really it.
Yeah. Well, actually, that makes me realize we were talking about MSI semifinals, and when we got pulled on the analytical kind of digression of all of that, that was after we were talking about the first semifinal. We never actually talked about Damwon and Mad Lions.
Yeah.
You want to take a chance to discuss that a little bit? I can always reorder this afterwards, and we can make it seem as if we talked about it all in a normal order. The magic.
I'm happy to touch on it, but for context as well, especially for anyone watching, I am very unfamiliar with both of these teams, just because I watched the LPL over the LCK, and European time zones put me to sleep. So, what I've actually mentioned this before, slight tangent. I've tweeted at Quickshot before saying your voice puts me to sleep in a good way, and he took a little bit of offense to it. I was like, nah, man, it's like he's such a methodical speaker with such a fantastic tone that I can fall asleep to you. You're not keeping me up, so it's a win. But what I would say about the semi-final between Damwon and Mad Lions is I have this feeling in my mind, and you can actually see it reflected through some of the champions that Mad have played, that they will be able to pull out all the stops and push Damwon Kia to their literal limits to try and really make them earn the finals berth. That's how I perceive that best of 5 going.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I think there have been moments where Damwon show why I thought they were the favorites coming in personally, and then other where I'm like, wow, this team's, maybe they're actually just not that good. Like maybe I'm completely wrong about them. Like I was saying earlier, every team is so inconsistent, it seems like, at this tournament. They have pieces that are just incredible. Like Showmaker and Canyon are just such good players. When Khan is working, when his Scion is working, it looks really great. It doesn't always work, it seems. I think even a player like Beryl, who has gotten a lot of flack this tournament for some silly deaths and just overplaying things and being much too loose. Like, I think he's always been that kind of player that he really likes to go for stuff. I tend to look at him as kind of like Korean Hillisang if you watch the LEC.
I get that.
But I say Korean 2020 Hillisang because I think Hillisang has played this year the way everybody thought he was playing last year, which wasn't quite fair, which is, a lot of inting. But last year it was a lot better with, going up for these plays that, when he takes the big risks, they can pay off huge, but he usually times them well, that even if they don't play out, it's not like he's giving away an objective for it or things like that. Like, I think Beryl times his aggression really well, that he's either going for a big win or a small loss. And so there happen to be a lot of small losses on it. but there are also a lot of big wins, and I don't think he gets enough credit for the positive side of the way he plays. And I think that tends to take away a little bit from people's estimation of him and of the team as a whole.
He doesn't do that thing where there's like 30 seconds till a Drake spawns and that's his moment to flash, take the opportunity. Yeah, he definitely makes a lot more sense with, you could call it tactical inting when it doesn't work. But it is, 5-head when it does work, because you're able to generate extra gold and snowball in downtimes in a game. And to your Khan point as well, I feel like the public perception is quite similar with Fudge, almost, for Cloud9. Like the Scion effect, almost, at this point, right? Someone picks Scion and, like, Khan's a freak show. He's so good at it. But it's not working for them. And so everyone's now saying, well, give him more agency, get him off these tanks. Your jungler is playing Udyr as his most played, and you're a Scion in top lane. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But at the same time, like, every team has their reasons as to why they're drafting these picks. Usually you need to blind a top laner, and that is a free blind pick option. And, League isn't always as simple as the 5 champions that are locked in. There's an order to this stuff. And the viewers, I think, are maybe stepping over that step.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can kind of get some preconceived notions about certain players and have a little bit of, like, seeing the entire forest and missing the trees involved, and sometimes lacking that context on why are things being played out in certain ways, or even just getting caught up in narratives, which I've spoken out a little bit as an enormous Fudge fan, and somebody who has been supporting him for a year and a half, ever since he first came into NA, and I was watching him in Academy. I'm a huge supporter of Fudge, and I think he's great. And I was out there championing him at the start of the year when a lot of people were giving him a really hard time for the way he started his year. But now I think he got picked up in a bit of a... I think people wanted to be really down on Cloud9 because of the way MSI was going, and they wanted to have something to say, look, here's the one good thing, why didn't you do more of that, and the rest of it, this is all garbage. And they kind of, like, fixated on this, and I'm glad that Fudge got put in this positive spotlight, but I think I think people kind of lost some of the nuance and context in evaluating what's he doing well, which things is he not doing well, where he can improve, how could the team actually be using him better, or what do they need to be doing differently. And I think he has some things that it definitely was not just a matter of Cloud9 would have won if they gave Fudge carries and let him win his lane or whatever. It's not like he was down in lane all the time because they drafted him bad matchups and that's it. He has things he has to improve on. So, we'll see how that plays out for summer, because he's very much on the right trajectory. He's improving a lot, and he's
being perceived positively as well, which is a nice turnaround, like you said. Absolutely. Like, regardless of the things that he needs to improve, he's got the infrastructure to help him. But, like, seeing Fudge received positively out of all members in that team, as the Oceanic fan, I'm like, that's amazing. But also as a Cloud9 fan, it's like that. I'm glad it finally came back around to, like, reality almost.
Yeah, I just hope, the only thing I'm a little wary of is that people have suddenly, on this back half of MSI, built him up on this pedestal almost. And if he struggles at all at the start of summer, I'm a little worried that people are going to turn on him, and that, maybe it won't be the same people who were praising him so hard then turning around and flaming him, but maybe the flamers will suddenly be allowed to kind of emerge and pop their heads up, and they've been shut up for a little while, and then they'll be able to pop their heads up. So I'm just hoping there can be some balance. That's the only thing, and I'm a man of moderation. So, not the best personality for a content creator, but here I am. Let's keep an even keel, folks. So, anyways,
podcast nicely.
Yeah. So this has been great. It's been really good, kind of catching up with you and kind of seeing what's been going on. Really appreciate you joining me on the show and making some time in your day for it. What is the best way people can follow you and follow the work that you're doing?
I'm primarily active on Twitter, so at RustyLol, which is below me right now. And my Instagram is the other thing, if anyone's interested in fitness, which is my current side hustle. I'm a personal trainer and coach. So it's Zack_Rusty_Pie. Good luck. But that's my Instagram, where you'll get more fitness content. So it's got my real name in there, not just my gaming handle.
I'll throw the links for those in the show notes so people can just scroll down and then click on it and don't have to remember it and type it in. So that'll make it a little easier. Great. Well, I appreciate this very much. And thank you to everyone for listening. You can support the True Sight podcast at patreon.com/oracleselixir. You can subscribe on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as anchor.fm/TrueSight. And I encourage you to check out the Oracle's Elixir Discord server where we talk about League of Legends esports, data science, and other topics. And links for all of those will be in the show notes as well. This has been the True Sight podcast, and I'm Tim Sevenhusen. Thanks for listening.